Welcome back to the Millennial Dentist Podcast, a podcast all about working smarter, not harder. Pushing dentists to go beyond dental school dentistry and build the practice of your dreams. Here is your host, the Millennial Dentist himself, Dr. Sullivan.
All right, welcome back, everybody, to the Millennial Dentist Podcast. Happy whatever day it is for you.
Monday.
Well, for
Monday
us, it's
after
Monday
Easter.
after Easter, but who knows when this will be aired and what you may be doing as a listener. But I'm super excited to we have Aubrey back on the show. Aubrey's our Director of Operations at Sullivan Dental Partners. Welcome back, Aubrey.
Thanks for having me. How's it going, guys?
Glad you're here. So we're going to talk about financial arrangements, specifically kind of the difference between in-office payment plans, third-party financing, why you should be tracking how much you're doing with financing in your practice, why I think it's one of the key metrics to success in 2023. So that's the hot take on that. Hey, we're super excited. The summit in Nashville, Tennessee with 3 dentists is sold out, but we are excited to say that we are going to be, there will be online access available. So that's something you can purchase and you'll get the entire summit recorded so that you can watch it with your teams back at home. If you weren't able to get a ticket, it is sold out. But like I said, that'll be a good way for you to get access to it. So reach out to probably Meredith at 3D Dentists or 3D just, get in touch with us some way or another. And that's going to be available for purchase. So that's kind of exciting.
How many cartwheels are you going to do?
Thing on that end. I will probably do some cartwheels at the event. I'm really excited about the summit. It's going to be good. It's going to be exciting.
Downtown Broadway, Taylor Swift weekend.
I know.
It's going to be crazy.
It's a good time of year in
Cinco de
Nashville.
Mayo.
Not to make all of you jealous, but aren't coming, but it's going to be really fun. Okay, so what I mentioned a second ago was that I think that when we look at our core fundamentals at 3D dentists are no secret. We believe in comprehensive diagnosis, influential communication, having firm financial arrangements set up in place with your patients, and we believe in priority scheduling. That's really the gist of what we do. It sounds so basic, and people want to be like, oh yeah, we already do that. And it's like, no, you don't. You don't do it to the level that you could do it. And it gets back to this, how we don't pour on gasoline on the fire of what works. We just kind of say, oh, that works pretty well, and we don't really dive into it. So we're going to talk a little bit about today and how we use financial arrangements in our practice. And for me, there's 2 things that we're going to talk about. One is what problems are we trying to solve with financial arrangements? Because you may be saying, well, I don't need this, I don't have a problem, and you're wrong. But we're going to talk about why you need them. And then to me, when I look at practices, I can tell very quickly the health of that practice's diagnosis and what type of dentistry they're doing by how much they're financing out, whether it's in-office or third party.
Yeah.
So that's the gist of it. So let's jump into it. Aubrey, talk about from your perspective what financial arrangements has, what it's done on your end as kind of someone who runs a practice.
Yeah. I mean, I think financial arrangements, just like what you were saying a minute ago with, offices thinking that they do them when in actuality they really don't. It's helped alleviate any confusion for the patient and for us. So, minimizing the amount of frustration that the patient experiences when they're like, well, you didn't tell me how much this was going to cost. That's a big part of it. I think it also makes it a lot simpler for anybody on the team to present treatment. So rather than needing, several treatment coordinators, you've got 5 hygienists that are capable of presenting the treatment because they've got the financial arrangements, they've got the payment options, they know the steps to present the dentistry.
So there's two things that we do, and I want to kind of slow down and dive into this a little bit, because for us, a financial arrangement really means 2 things. It means a financial menu, and then there's kind of the options in which we take. So talk about that a little bit. What kind of things are on our menu, or what should a financial menu look like?
So we've got our in-house payment options, and then we've got our third-party payment options. And the breakdown or the document that we have.
And that's not all we have on the menu. You can just pay us.
Well, yeah, prepayment is always an option. That's the first thing listed on the financial menu. Yeah, cash, credit card, check is the first thing. And then
but I say that because like for most people, if I were to say like, how can you pay in your practice? Most doctors or teams are going to say cash, credit card, check, maybe care credit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was us, a few years ago.
And to me, that's a pretty limiting amount of options. And so I don't say that negatively because like my assumption is that the majority of you listening, that's kind of what's on your menu currently. And so there's two ways that we kind of want to look at this. One is how can we improve the options on our menu? And then two, is everybody getting our menu? So keep going on what's on the menu.
Yeah. So prepayment, cash, check, card, which, sounds like you're being really lenient and giving so many options, but really most people use a credit card or debit card. But then our in-house payment options are listed next. We've got 3, 6, and 12-month payment plan options. And then below that is our third-party options. And that goes into the different options that we have there. And are on extended.
And give us a kind of ballpark of what those what our third party options are, not who they are, but what they are.
Yeah. So third party options we start to bring in after it's mainly based on the amount. So when the payment starts or the total cost starts to exceed like 8,000 to 10,000 is when the payment options generate for the third party financing, and they go up to 12 years. So that helps.
3 years, 5 years, 7 years,
10,
all the
12.
way up to potentially 12 years. That's insane.
Yep. You can't even do that with a car.
Yeah, guess you can with your teeth. So first off, a couple things I want to look at. Well, let's get back to, okay. At face value, what I hope you kind of see there is do you have a menu? First, do you have a menu? Meaning, is it very clearly laid out somewhere where patients know exactly all the different ways that they can pay for stuff?
And your team knows.
And your team knows.
Yeah. Yeah,
because if your team knows that you can't, I'll give a side note here. So I bought a dishwasher at Home Depot a couple weeks ago. So they come, and part of this dishwasher was like, they'll come do a free water testing at your house. Well, my fridge doesn't have one of those like water dispensers. So I've been using this Brita thing. And I'm like, well, this is really annoying. So I was like, maybe I'll take them up on this free water testing and just get totally sold. And which is kind of what happened. And see what the deal is. So they come out to my house on Saturday. They do this whole spiel, and I'm like, let's go. Let's just get to the chase. Like, I could care less about all this like BS. But I literally get sold like, everything. And I don't buy it. And they get to the end, and I'm like, well, what's it cost? And guess what they tell me? $154 a month.
That's the only option?
That was the option but I found it so interesting is you had a way to toggle back and forth basically between what the full amount was, which was like 10 grand, but it wasn't even $154 a month for however months. I was like, well, how many months is that? It was just $154 a month. And I was like, if this isn't the most perfect insight into the way that our culture and population buys at this point. We don't buy in $1,000 chunks. We buy in $100 a month. And I was like, they have made something that is completely ridiculous. Like, we've all functioned with, this is like normal Nashville water. Like, it's not like bad water. I mean, it's probably not great water, but it's like no one's dying off the water. This isn't Flint, Michigan. And so I'm sitting here, but I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, this is crazy. Half of our society in Nashville has no business paying $10,000 for some water filtration system for your house. Yet, who knows how many people are buying it because it's $150 a month, because it's affordable. And so this is something that like you'll hear T-Bone and I talk about all the time of how important affordability is versus price. And so part of our success has not been because we convince people better, because we have richer patients. It comes from the fact that we have a menu that gives patients the opportunity to make dentistry more affordable. So one problem that we're trying to solve is we're trying to enroll more dentistry, meaning we're trying to get more people to say yes to more dentistry. So instead of just doing one crown, they'll do both crowns. Instead of doing the 2 crowns, they'll do the whole quadrant of teeth. Instead of doing one quadrant, they'll just go ahead and take care of the whole mouth whether it's fillings, crowns, whatever it is, it's trying to get people to say yes to more dentistry, which ultimately goes back to that whole idea that we talk about at 3D Dentist, which is fewer well-planned visits. Because if I can cut my visits down to, instead of seeing 12 patients a day, to 5 patients a day, then I'm more relaxed, my team's more relaxed, it's less turnover, I'm more profitable, but that all makes the assumption that I'm enrolling more dentistry on those 5 patients. Otherwise, you'd be losing money.
And the patients are happier. They appreciate
Oh, absolutely.
That. Yeah.
So we're trying to minimize visits, fewer well-planned visits. And so one of the things that Firm Financial Arrangements does is it enrolls more dentistry, and we utilize the menu to do that. The second thing that it does is it manages your AR. Now, I'll let you talk a little bit more about AR just because that's kind of something you look on a regular basis. But I'm shocked how many doctors routinely I'll see, and they'll have these just pretty significant ARs, that they don't even realize are out there.
Yeah. And when you have AR that is, regardless of how long the time frame is, when you have it and you don't have an FFA to go off of and a document saying that the patient agreed on the amount, you really don't have much of a leg to stand on other than the verbal agreement.
And the fact that the work's already been done.
May or may not have had conversation about, and the dentistry's been done. So a lot of times the unfortunate part of that is that you end up having to adjust it off.
I mean, how difficult is it to go back and get money from a patient that we did dentistry on 18 months ago and there's no agreement in place?
I mean, very difficult. Not only that, you've probably seen them like 3 or 4 times for cleanings along the way. And so then it's really awkward when you're like, yeah, sorry, we didn't catch this. We didn't have this conversation, a couple years ago. So, by the way, you owe $1,000. Like that, there's nothing worse as the patient or the person saying that to them. So that's not a fun conversation to have. So I definitely think that the firm financial arrangements help that a ton. And then on the AR side, like you said, because patients are setting up the payment plans, it's just coming out routinely. And so as long as you're managing the payment plans closely and on a monthly basis, then your AR, is close to none because it's already set up.
Gotcha. That's interesting, and I find it, and part of it I think is, again, you're kind of on, typically if you listen to this podcast, you're on 2 sides of the coin. One side is that you're already successful and you're just trying to figure out, okay, where are ways that I can improve and get better. And what I tend to see there is that those offices actually tend to have some level of an AR problem just because you're successful, meaning you've got enough volume coming in that you really don't even notice how much the bucket's leaking out the bottom from that side of things, from on a financial side of things, because you're getting so much from insurance or the part that is getting paid that there's enough gravy that you're not missing that, which is crazy because that's like all the margin.
The immediate or instant gratification of it too, because you're like, I can go ahead and do this now versus having to slow down, present the financial arrangement.
Oh yeah. I mean, how many times does that happen where we got a patient in the chair for a limited and they want to do the crown and there's this reaction like go, 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 yet we have no arrangement in place. So we don't even know if they're going to pay us, to do it. So we're trying to minimize that problem. And now, yeah, if you have no AR problem, then you're obviously doing something right. But then the problem is are you presenting any dentistry outside of what the patient can afford? And my argument would be that dentistry is expensive. Like, and how can we not accept that the fact that to get a tooth replaced, one tooth in your mouth, if it's missing, is $4,000 to $5,000? Like, that's expensive. And so my argument is that if you don't have an AR issue or if you don't have a payment plan issue, then what you do have
is opportunity.
Is opportunity, and you're underperforming because if dentistry is not being affordable for the patients, meaning it's not becoming unaffordable, then you're not presenting enough dentistry at one time. And whether that's cosmetics, whether that's just functional dentistry, whatever it is, I will tell you that if you don't need financial arrangements, you're not presenting enough. So that's what we'll look at offices and we'll say, okay, I'm looking to see, okay, if your office is healthy, there's a good chance that you've got some amount of your revenue. And we're going to look at probably I think the number to look at would be somewhere between 10 and 20%. I mean, between 10 and 20% of your money coming in is coming from some level of third-party financing. Whether that's you or even and like we're advocating that no one should start with in-office financing. Like if you aren't doing much financing at all you do is care credit, then you don't have the I guess you're not ready yet to do in-office financing per se. So like we're a big advocate that you start with third parties. And then we can kind of talk about the third parties that we have. But that would be kind of the gist of what that's going on.
Yeah, the third party options. I mean, there's a ton out there. So if Care Credit is the main thing that you're offering, then there's lots of other alternatives that are still, giving the interest-free options like Care Credit does, but they also give much further out options. And I think that's the big window of patients that you're missing, because the number of times that you probably present a treatment plan that's $6,000 or $7,000 and the patient immediately goes, okay, I'll go home and think about it, and then you never hear from them again. Those are the people that, like, in your mind, you may not think it's a problem, but those are the people you're missing. Is that middle of the line, $5,000 to $10,000 window of patients that say that they're going to move forward but never do because they get home and immediately the value goes down in their mind.
Well, we've got and what we kind of see too is that there's different companies have different niches, right? Mm-hmm. So like we know that if someone's going to be over, like how often does Care Credit approve someone that needs $25,000 worth of work?
Oh gosh, never.
Never. So like we know that like we're going to ask them. So if you think about this, if you're in your practice right now and your options are cash, credit card, check, or Care Credit, the only way someone's doing dentistry over $10,000 is either you're in office financing it, which I doubt is happening, or you're relying on that person to pay cash. And there's like no one, that's a very, very limited group of people that can afford that.
And I mean, even if you're doing Care Credit for a $10,000 case, that's a, $1,200 monthly payment if it's over a year. So it's not that's a high monthly payment.
Do you know how much of what our percentage of collections last year was financed?
I think it was right at 25.
Off the top of your head, around 25%. So that kind of gives you a good, I mean, and obviously we're a big group practice. So like numbers wise, it's going to sound a lot bigger, but from a percentage standpoint, that should give you a lot of perspective. If you're $1 million practice, that would mean $250,000 came from, some level of finance treatment. And so what I'm looking for is one of the first things I do when I get into someone's numbers is I'm looking for how much did you finance last year? And if I see that number's low, then I immediately don't think, okay, diagnosis. It's how I diagnose how to help offices, because that's going to tell me that we've got to figure out, okay, we're not getting to the point where dentistry is becoming unaffordable based off the diagnosis and patients wanting to do it. So it's either a diagnosis issue or it's a communication issue. Typically, that's what we see.
I think the team members also appreciate being able to give patients options. It makes them more comfortable presenting the treatment plan when they know that they've got some options to offer. Oh,
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. We have to start looking, we have to be more consumer driven. And so because of that, we have to look outside and say, what's working in real life. And that's where I bring up my silly water example, but it's like, yeah, that is unaffordable dentistry for so many people, yet people are doing it because think about it. They priority schedule. They ask me when does it work for me to get there. I find the buying process so interesting. So one, they have hours that are available. So they were willing to do evenings and Saturdays. So I was like, well, I'll be there just chilling, watching the Masters on Saturday. So I was like, I can do that. Next question they asked us is will your spouse or significant other be able to be there? Like that, like who else who's making the buying decisions? Because I want to close you today. So to me, that's so fascinating. Like why don't we, and I know we do some of that stuff, but like that's stuff that you have to do. Is there someone with you that will help make these decisions? We'd love to have them at that appointment that day. Then they come, and then what's the first thing they have to do? They have to create the value, right? So then they go through this whole spiel. They take their x-rays, they show you the photos, and they do all the dental things with my water.
Meanwhile, you're watching the Masters.
Meanwhile, I'm watching the Masters. I was actually having a mimosa. I was having a mimosa watching the Masters, and I was like, dude, I honestly don't care about this. I'm a brass tacks guy. So I was like, I just need to know, I'm already sold. Like I let you come in here. I was like, I know my water's shit. Like I know what you're going to show me. So either just tell me what it costs and how long it's going to take and when can I get it installed?
The 4 promises.
Yeah, basically. and so then they're like, well, it's 10 grand. I'm like, $10K, that's a little more than I can just like pull. I was like, if that had been $5K or less, like I would have just pull the trigger. But I was like, that's a little more than I want. I got to think on that, or I got to at least Google or fact check some of this stuff.
And then they say 154 a month.
Well, that's what they led with. So they led with 154 a month, and then I've already gotten a text. But it's just fascinating, right? Because we then how often do we follow up with these people, right? Well, I have a text first thing this morning. Hi, Richard. Great news. This is Dick, manager at Rainsoft. I reviewed your quote and I believe I can help. Call me at blah, 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 blah. So they've already found a way to, to cut money or do what it is. And so and some of you may be like, well, that's annoying, or I don't want to bug my patients, but that is the buying process. Mm-hmm. Look around you at how that works. And I'm not saying you have to take it to some nth degree, but I have no doubt that if I don't respond today, I will have another text or email. Oh, by the way, he emailed it to me too. So both methods of communication is how it's working. So I just find that fascinating. And we, in general terms, don't do a good enough job of being consumer driven when it comes to our buying process.
And that's a normal process. That's not really unique to
this water company.
Yeah.
No.
So for whatever reason in the dental world, we think that we're being annoying to patients. And honestly, I feel like we hear from patients sometimes if we forget to follow up, oh, well, you didn't call me. And it's patients are almost expecting that. They want you to want their business too.
So recapping here, so our menu is to lay out all our options. Now, one of the things that I find very often is that someone will have a menu, but they're not giving it to every person. They're waiting till someone says, well, I can't afford that. Talk a little bit, Aubrey, about what we're doing and why that's not a good way to do it as far as presenting your menu to patients.
I think the most important thing is you never want to assume. I mean, the patients that you would think wouldn't be interested in financing are the ones that are, and vice versa. So for the team, it makes it a really seamless process to know that this is the sequence of events that's going to happen with every single patient. And then I think, too, it makes it just really uniform for the patients on the receiving end. And I think it also takes the focus off of insurance. So for all of these patients that are super insurance driven, the menu lists, this is what the cost of treatment is, this is what your estimated portion is after insurance, and then here's the options. And so it immediately switches gears from that entire insurance conversation that could take over to the payment options that are available.
Yeah, I would agree with that, because when we focus then on the top number, but gets watered down, and it really just becomes on what the patient's portion. And really, that's what the patients care about anyways, is are you maximizing my insurance and what's my portion going to be?
And then focusing, because then the next thing is, well, I may want to just start here. And so we even, again, push patients towards the financial menu, and by saying totally get it. If it's because of finances or because of costs, we want to make it easy for you and also minimize the number of trips you have to make, which is why we offer these payment options. And so if you would like to get it all done in one visit, great, we can just set you up on a payment plan. And that way you don't have to come over several trips.
Well, I think that there's a big psychological part to it getting presented to everybody, because like you mentioned, I think that there's probably 50% of the people or more that we do finance dentistry with wouldn't have asked for financial options just because they're embarrassed or they don't
pride a little bit.
They don't want it in, especially like that's the big misnomer. I mean, it's very, for those of you that don't know me personally, we live in a very, very affluent county. So, I mean, we're basically the wealthiest county in Tennessee, yet we financed, we financed over, at least over $1 million, almost $2 million last year in dentistry. So that kind of tells you the reality of the situation is that it doesn't make a difference, because most of the people around here are leveraged to the fullest extent. So they need the financing, they live off the financing of it in that regard.
For sure.
So you have to present to everybody. And I would argue too, the second thing about that is that most of your AR, if you truly get down to it, it's not coming from big cases, right?
Mm-mm. It's the ones smaller cases, $200, $300. That's what all adds up on the AR.
Yeah. And
those are the limited exam patients that you jumped straight into doing a crown without presenting an FFA. And so then you don't have a leg to stand on.
Yes. It's not the big cases. It's the MODs. It's the double crown. It's all this stuff like that. And that's the part that's killing you. And yeah, I like to do dentistry for free. I just like to choose who I do it on. I don't want to just do it because I was told to do it because we didn't have a freaking financial arrangement in place.
And as much as you'd like to hope that the honor system or trusting patients, is an okay way to go, it still will come back to bite you in the butt. And again, the patients want to know the numbers just as much as we do. So I think it's important for everybody to know moving forward before you start.
I agree. Okay, so some practical advice. So we use Sunbit. Sunbit is our kind of go-to for what was $0 to $10,000 cases, pretty much. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So if something is below $10,000, which may be all you're currently presenting, which is no problem, then Sunbit would be the one to use. Care Credit we pretty much only use if they've already got a Care Credit account. We also have Proceed. Yeah. Progressive's our marketing. We use Proceed, and then we also use NaluPay. So we're using essentially 4 third-party options. And some of you may be like, why do you need multiples? And it's just because some people, the algorithms work with some people's credit scores, not others. And then we also know that, okay, Sunbit and Care Credit, like Sunbit tends to be the more go-to for the lower niche. Care Credit, a lot of people already have those accounts. So we want to have it because if someone's already got the account, they want to use it. And then the other two are kind of our go-to ones for our $15,000 and above, which we know the other companies aren't going to use just because that's not their niche. It's the same reason that like you have some dental practices that focus on this type of dentistry versus that type of dentistry. The banks are the same way. So we've got a couple of those options. So when you look at your menu, currently, like write down all the options that you have. And if you don't have cash, check, credit card, Sunbit, Care Credit, NaluPay, Proceed, in-office financing, 3, 6, 12 months, then you, and I mean this in not a negative way, but in that way, you're less consumer driven than Sullivan Dental Partners is. And so if you're giving your patients less ways to make dentistry affordable. And so in order to compete, you've got to do those things that will help make you more consumer driven. So that's a big one of my point. And
I would say the most robust options should be for the treatment that you like doing the most. So like for us, we know that we love doing all on X, implant dentures. So we're going to have multiple options for patients that are in that price point. And that way, if they get declined on one, we've got another option that a lot of times they get approved for. Patient Fi is another one that is a good in-between option for like the $10,000 to $20,000 range that we have too.
Have that one.
And that one actually offers up to 2 years interest-free too, which is nice. So yeah, I think to your point, like our team, the majority of our team is presenting treatment plans that are under, the $10,000 amount. And then our treatment coordinators are presenting the larger payment options with the third-party financing companies for the larger procedure. So the whole team doesn't have to know every in and out of every financing option, but you just want to have a good understanding and good idea of
if you're a hygienist, you pretty much need to know how to use Sunbit.
Yes.
But other than that,
super user friendly.
Other than that, they're never going to do a Proceed treatment plan.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yep. So then it's less daunting for you to, go back and kind of train your team on it because it's just a handful of people that are going to be using all of them, which would be your treatment coordinators or, patient team members that are presenting that more often. Cool.
All right. Well, I want to get into in-office financing, but I think we're going to save it for another episode. Just because it's a whole bag of tricks. But hopefully what I hope you gathered from this episode is that you've got to have a financial menu. You've got to have a financial menu and you need to have options on it to make dentistry affordable for your patients. We're doing this to enroll more dentistry, to decrease our AR, and that menu needs to be presented to all patients. It just does. I mean, you can't not give it to some. You can't wait for them to ask for it. Now, the hurdle in this is difficult to implement. Talk a little bit about that from a standpoint, Aubrey, of what is expected from an implementation of this.
Yeah. That's what I was actually going to make sure we went back to, because I do think it's important that the top portion of the financial arrangement is describing what the treatment is in very layman's terms. So, we're not getting into the nitty gritty of like surfaces and grafting and all of the technical terms that we would normally, technobabble that we would normally, use in the dental world or on the doctor side. But it's a very basic description of the treatment, and then the payment options are listed below. And so we have a document that we use. It's saved on all the computers for any team member to access, and then they just type everything up. It kind of feels a little old school, but it's so much better than presenting whatever the treatment plan option is in your dental software that has all the surfaces and tooth numbers, and gets into the confusing jargon for the patients. This just simplifies it a ton. So the team members have access to it all. They type it out, print it off, patient signs it, they sign it, and then we make a copy for the patient. So it's very streamlined. Everybody has access to it. And there's tons of softwares out there too that you can use. But if you didn't have any software available, this would be a very doable thing to implement in your office. For sure.
Hey, if this stuff sounds cool to you and you're like, gosh, I want to know more about it. Obviously, we go into lots of details. Our mastermind program, it's like what the core of this is built on is this type of stuff. Our mastermind program leads to our team mastermind where we get your team members involved. You get access to all these documents, all this stuff. So if you're looking to like, hey, gosh, this sounds like something I need to do. I want to know more. I want to get more into this. If you just want to come in and like really be submerged in what works in a day in and day out practice, that's our mastermind program. We have a new one starting. This one, our current one ends in, June. And then we'll have a new one kicking off in July for the 6 months. So we run them twice a year, July to February, and then January to like August or something of that nature. So anyways, check that out, 3d-dentist.com, and check out our mastermind program. Otherwise, I think that's pretty much it for today. I hope you will look into what your menu looks like. I hope you will look into these third-party financing options, and please go check how much you financed last year. If you financed less than 20% or somewhere in the 5% or the 3% range, let that be a voice.
Motivator.
There's so much more out there that you could be doing. And let me tell you, not only do you everybody wins, you get to do more of the dentistry that you love to do. Not this back-breaking rat race, 2 columns, fillings, crowns, just exhausting dentistry. Patients get to do the rewarding dentistry that they want to do that to this point has been unaffordable for them. Getting teeth back, straightening teeth, cosmetics. Your team gets to participate in that. You get to do fewer well-planned visits. You're not working so hard. So I cannot tell you enough how rewarding this can be if you can implement this and put this in practice. Start with third-party financing. Please don't jump into in-office payment plans. We will follow up an episode on in-office payment plans where we'll go into details and talk about that because that is a really cool source of kind of getting that percentage back that we lose when we use third-party financing. And that's something we didn't talk about much, and we'll probably cover more in the next episode. But I will tell you, I will give 10% away all day long to enroll more dentistry. And I mean, that's like saying well, what about that percentage that they take? Well, I mean, it's either you do $30,000 and you give away none, or you do $100,000 and you give away 10 grand. I will do that all day long. So hope you enjoyed this. So glad to be back recording. Oh, it feels good. Work smarter, not harder, everybody. And we will see you next time.
Thank you for listening to The Millennial Dentist. Visit us online at millennialdentist.com.